Challenge accepted. Alright, look, I'm not about to junk up this intro with a bunch of channel crap like I do with the Afton ranking, but I am going to lay out some ground rules for what we're going to be doing in this video. First off, and, well, only off I guess, despite EnchantedMob claiming that Dance to Forget did not impact the story in any way and was just kinda meant to be a standalone part in its own universe, we're treating it as canon for one reason. Why the frick would you spend so many months animating something and then just discard it as not canon? Everybody understand now? Alright, it's canon? Alright, y'all understand? Alright, we're good. Now let's begin. Yeah, unfortunately this part really didn't do it for me. This is part 2 of the series, following Disconnected, which I'll talk about later on in the video. Anyway, this part follows Henry right after he found out about his business partner William Afton's intentions to murk some children, as he attempts to find and save his own daughter from becoming Afton's first victim. Now, I'll go ahead and list what I liked about the thing first. I appreciated that it stayed true to the dynamic set up in Disconnected, and I liked the emotional punch that it packed. The animation also kept my attention the entire time, despite its gloomy atmosphere. Now, time to unload my list of cons. I feel like the visuals in this animation were probably the least impressive out of the entire series. Now, by no means were they bad, it's just that the visuals in literally every other video outshine the ones here. I just didn't really see that above and beyond EnchantedMob animation style that you see in a lot of their videos. Like in Disconnected, a bunch of lava and sparks and electricity effects were all really cool, and It's Me and Break the Cycle, they had some fire effects that were really outstanding. But here it's kinda just meh, if I'm being honest. There's also a fair amount of obvious clipping in this video, which for some reason really triggered me, and I'm not really sure why, but it just kinda did. Some of the facial expressions here also just could be a bit dull and lifeless at times, which is a shame since we got some really good ones in Disconnected, and basically every other part of this series. However, the animation on the characters' bodies are really good here, like walk cycles for instance. In this video, Henry spends the majority of it with a bullet wound, and it's very visible that he's in pain the entire time, which is something that I really enjoyed seeing. Like, not him in pain or anything. No, not Henry in pain, that's bad. What I meant is like, you know, the visual aspect of it is good. Anyways, I also really appreciated how William Afton was displayed here as a cold and ruthless killer. It's kind of like the way he was portrayed in the Follow Me video from last year that they produced, but just not as good. But then again, these videos had years of improvement between them, so take that comparison with a grain of salt. One final thing to note is the lighting. I think it was mostly good, with really only one noticeable spot where Henry was slightly overexposed on the arm. So overall, not a bad animation. I'll list out a lot of good qualities about it, but overall I find myself disliking this part more than the others. Fun fact, when I first started production on this video, I actually thought that this would be at the bottom of the list. But after comparing it to Save Me a bit more, I decided that it didn't deserve the lowest spot on the thing, but just slightly. Now, the main reason that Dance to Forget did rank higher is simply because of the visuals. They overall look better than they did in Save Me. I also like the twist at the end, where we find out that Afton killed his wife and that she now possesses Ballora. Hey, wait a second, this would actually make for an interesting part of the story, wouldn't it? Nah, EMob said it wasn't canon. But to be fair, if it was, then I would have ripped way harder on Break the Cycle than I did in my video where I compared it to 3 displays going back. But in all seriousness, it was a big shame that this did not impact the overall story, as I really felt it could have made it a lot more interesting. But for the sake of the video and the ranking, we're going to be counting it as canon. Anyways, one major gripe that I had with Dance to Forget is the fact that 2/3 of it just feels like filler. I mean seriously, it's mainly just Afton running around this giant underground facility until he finds Ballora. And speaking of the underground facility, it is very hard to believe that all of this is right below Afton's house. I mean, just look at how big this place is. In the games, we know that Sister Location is under his house, but it's nowhere near as big as this place is. Anyways, let me talk about the visuals some more. There were a few things in particular that I thought were cool, like the lava and the ghost effects on Afton's dead wife. Another thing I want to bring up is the pacing. It feels pretty steady and never gets ahead of itself or goes too slowly, which is a major plus for me since that's one of the main things I look for in animations is good pacing. However, I did find myself a bit bored on this part on rewatch, which I think is, again, the fact that 2/3 of it is basically filler. I would continue talking about this thing, but that's really all I have to say about it. Another decent entry to the series, and it probably deserves a 7 out of 10. Now this is where we get to the good part of the series. Disconnected, despite being the first entry in the series, is shockingly spectacular and a great way to kick it off. The visuals, story, and pacing here are all extremely strong and make for an excellent beginning of the story. Another great thing about Disconnected is the environments, which feel really well built, like right here when Henry visits his daughter's grave. And like I mentioned earlier, there were some really good facial expressions sprinkled throughout this video, this one of Afton being my favorite. The song choice here also fits perfectly with the narrative that the animation was trying to tell, where Henry and Afton work together to achieve their dreams, but Henry ends up being betrayed by him. There are also some very well synced moments and great transitions, which is just another reason for me to seat Disconnected above Dance to Forget and Save Me. But it's only in the number 4 position. Why, you may ask? Well, like every animation, this one has its own set of flaws. I think the biggest one here is the fact that the animation was just the first in the series, so the EnchantedMob team was way less skilled than they were further on down the line. Like for example, some of the movements here aren't as advanced as they are in later animations like Dream Your Dream or Break the Cycle. But technical stuff aside, let me talk about the story of it. It follows Henry and William Afton as they begin to make plans to start a pizzeria franchise together. However, Henry finds out about his business partner's intent to kill kids, which ends up breaking things between them. Honestly, I appreciate the dynamic for the series that this video set up, focusing on Afton and Henry as the main characters. And thankfully, most of the animations later on in the series keep up with this, and if they don't, they usually just work as one of the solo animations for these characters. Afton got Dance to Forget, and Henry got Dream Your Dream. In the end, I think Disconnected gives this series a very strong start and sets it up to have a lot of potential, which is why it makes it to the number 4 spot on the list. However, it didn't get any higher simply because it's just not as good as the other 3 animations that are in this series that we haven't talked about yet. But I'd definitely say that it's a solid 7.5 out of 10.
Break the cycle. Come follow me. I'll cut the strings.
For those of you unfamiliar with my channel, this may come as a bit of a shock to you. But yeah, I don't think Break the Cycle deserves to be any higher on the list. I actually debated about putting it in the number 4 spot, but decided against it in the end. Now, I did already talk extensively about this in a previous video about my issues with Break the Cycle, so if the section is shorter than the other ones, that's why. For some context, this is the finale of the Disconnected series, which is part of the reason why it's so daggum low on the list. As a finale, this animation should have taken the time and the effort to tie up all the loose ends that the Disconnected narrative had up to this point, but unfortunately, it just mowed over most of them. For starters, Henry doesn't even acknowledge Charlotte as Lefty, something that's extremely disappointing to me. The previous animation in the series, Dream Your Dream, was all about how broken Henry had become after Afton killed Charlotte. So, wouldn't it make a bit of sense to bring that point in the story to a satisfying end? Apparently not, let's cut that. Another issue is how weightless this feels. For example, Michael Afton's death. Michael had barely even been in the series until this point, and his only role in the overall story was kind of just baiting the animatronics into the restaurant so that Henry could light them all on fire. So when Henry does start that fire, which kills both Michael and some of the animatronics, it just feels meaningless if I'm going to be honest. So here's my solution of how it could have been fixed. EnchantedMob could have just released a video either before or after Dream Your Dream, which would allow the audience to get to know Michael a bit and actually care about his death and break the cycle. If anything, the Michael video could also show you the events of Sister Location, which would fill in a large plot hole of the Disconnected series. I think Seth or somebody said that one of the other past videos that they'd made was technically canon to the Disconnected storyline, and does fill in that gap, but I've never seen any formal announcement on that, so I'm not really going to count that as canon, even if it technically is. Another thing, and take this with a grain of salt because it kind of isn't relevant, but Dance to Forget, as I said, I'm going to treat it as canon, so here we go. If it had been canon, Scraptrap/Afton should have taken a moment to acknowledge that Ballora, aka his dead wife, was part of Molten Freddy. And speaking of Molten Freddy, okay, look, the guy is my favorite FNaF character, but I just have to admit, he's about as irrelevant as it comes here. Since we never did see the events of Sister Location in the series, the audience doesn't have any clue why this random amalgamation of wires and robots is here, alongside the characters who are actually important to the narrative. He's simply here because the lore of FNaF says that he has to be. In the end, I think Break the Cycle should have probably been split in between 2 parts in order to properly tie up all of those loose ends and to fix all my problems with the characters. Part 1 could have focused on Michael, Scrap Baby, and Molten Freddy since they all kind of share similar stories, and then Part 2 could have focused on Henry, Lefty, and the end with him defeating Scraptrap/Afton. Yeah, that fight would definitely need to stay, it was really cool. Now, all I've really done is just crap on this animation so far, so before we move on, I should probably give the compliments where they're due. The visual effects here are outstanding to look at, and really amazing, especially with the fire. And the ending fight between Scraptrap and Henry was really cool, as I already said. Wait a second, this actually reminds me of another problem. Yeah, Henry's wife. She comes in to save Henry at the end of the fight, but other than that, she has no relevance at any point in this story. She doesn't drive Henry to end all the animatronics, she's never the focus of a video. She is simply just a tool that the plot uses whenever it needs her, which is only used once with the ending fight scene. She's really just another wasted character that was done wrong. In my video where I compared Break the Cycle to 3A displays going back, I think I gave Break the Cycle an 8.5 out of 10. But looking back at that now, that was bad. I found way more problems this time around than I did a few months back, so I think the final score for Break the Cycle now is a 7.5 out of 10. This animation is underrated and underappreciated. I rarely ever see anybody talking about it at this point, which is really sad. Now, it's not some complete masterpiece, and I'm not going to make it out to be that, but it does set out to do what it wanted to do. It's Me is part 4 of the Disconnected series, following Dance to Forget. It follows a younger Michael Afton, who follows his father William Afton back to the pizzeria, where he watches his father get attacked by all the animatronics which are out for revenge. Already, I see some potential here to develop Michael a bit of a character by giving him a defining moment in his life, but unfortunately this chance is never utilized. Man, Michael was really done wrong in this series. But let's try not to be so negative right now. For starters, just like with Break the Cycle, I really like the visuals in this video. And not just with the fire, although it was undoubtedly the best part of the visuals. Everything from the detailed rigs to the spark effects and the flashback effects are very pleasant to look at. I also enjoyed the action in this video. It felt mostly grounded in reality and didn't ever feel too cartoony. Mostly grounded. Another thing I appreciated was that we got to learn about Afton's murders during the video rather than showing them to the viewer beforehand. It's a different approach, which I think works decently and is definitely appreciated. Now on to some of the smaller details. I liked the animation each of the animatronics had when the puppet made them wake up, and I liked that Charlotte was still herself, even as the puppet, and I thought that the scene where Afton runs from the ghost of the kids was really cool. And I've officially run out of good things to say about It's Me. On to the bad! First off, Michael has no relevance to the story, as you could probably already guess. The only character that he even sort of impacts is the puppet, and even then, it's not very substantial. It's honestly kind of starting to really tick me off at this point how Michael's basically just dead weight until the plot calls on him for something. If you're going to make the character as unnecessary as you can, then just do it some of the other animators do with their FNaF characters and their story. Cut them out. Yeah, you're going to get a bunch of 9-year-olds in your comment section going, "Where's Michael? Where's Michael?" But you know what? I don't care, neither should you. When creating a series as large as this one, it's important to take some necessary steps, even if you don't feel like it or even really want to. One smaller issue I had with the animation was the ending. At the end, Afton hides inside the spring bunny suit and gets surrounded by the ghosts in the fire before he gets spring locked. And quite frankly, this is probably one of the least convincing portrayals of the spring lock failure that I've ever seen, which is pretty unfortunate. The scene literally lasts for like 2 seconds, and yes, I counted. And it's basically just Afton rolling over and shaking a little bit. I've even seen some really low quality animations pull off this scene better, so to see it this bad in a project this large is pretty disappointing. Overall, I'd say that this part is probably an 8.5 out of 10. It's not the most crazy or amazing animation out there, but it's still really good for what it is, and definitely one of the better parts of the series. I'm also giving it a bit more grace than I did Break the Cycle, because it didn't have the pressure of wrapping up all the loose ends of the stories that had been placed on its shoulders. And with all that said, let's move on to my number 1 pick. Yeah, I don't know what else you thought would make it to the number 1 spot. Dream Your Dream is probably the definition of a revolutionary animation. Up until this point, nothing quite like it had existed. But once it came out, it kind of sparked its own genre. It's unfortunately gotten to the point where I'd have to describe that genre as overused and stale, as basically every small animator uses it now, but this animation was the first to do it. Anyways, the story follows Henry as he goes through the grief and inner turmoil after Afton kills Charlotte. His wife is also slightly present here, but as I said earlier, she's basically irrelevant until the ending fight and Break the Cycle, which is still really unfortunate. Anyways, over the course of the animation, Henry begins to form a plan to lure all of the remaining animatronics to a secluded location, and he happens to conveniently find Michael to help him out. And again, gosh dang it, missed character opportunity. If Michael had his own separate video covering the events of Sister Location, he could have maybe intentionally been looking for Henry to help destroy the animatronics as well. Just a thought. One of the criticisms I have for this part of the series is some of the attempted emotional stuff. Now look, before my comments are flooded with people screaming at me for just having an opinion, let me explain myself. The genre that I said Dream Your Dream created is basically just have a character in the FNaF universe that's usually Henry have a sad and emotional segment of the story. But I've got a major problem with this that every animation falls into with this category. It's forced and it's cheap. Now, I'm going to cut Dream Your Dream some slack since it did have a bit of proper setup and Disconnected and Save Me, but usually in all these other animation series I see, the emotional stuff is just forced in and it only lasts for a single video. And the same thing kind of applies here. I really appreciate the team taking a step back from the legit FNaF lore in exchange for a more emotional story, but it just doesn't land all the way for me. Primarily because it just feels like it's setting up for this grand, big, emotional climax, only for it to be completely glossed over when Break the Cycle rolls around. You could technically say that it's just me criticizing Dream Your Dream because the overall story didn't work out the way it should have, and you'd be right, but it just dampers Dream Your Dream for me. I just can't take it seriously, since I know basically anything emotionally related isn't going to matter in the future. Kinda funny how Break the Cycle affects stuff that isn't just itself. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is that Dream Your Dream took a genuine shot at being emotional, but it only partially works, primarily due to the story being set up in all the previous parts of the story, only for it to fail later on. However, if you strip away the emotional stuff from this video, what's left? A boring, flimsy addition to the series. If you cut out the sad parts, it's basically just Henry going to one of the old pizzerias and grabbing a remote, hiring Michael to open a restaurant as bait for the animatronics, and then using that said remote to lure all the animatronics to Michael's location. See? Without the emotional beats, it's basically just an overextended part of the series that could have been spread out among the other videos. So, that's really all I have to say for Dream Your Dream. It's good, don't get me wrong, but underneath its emotional cover, it just feels like a flimsy story that doesn't really deserve to be there. Okay, and yes, I'm aware it's been like well over a month since I've uploaded. Look, I'm really sorry, I've just been extremely busy with a ton of real life stuff that's just gotten in the way of me making videos. I'm also trying to currently learn how to animate, so when I make reviews for things that aren't Minecraft animations, you won't just be staring at a sketch that I drew, you'll be staring at a slight little animation. Speaking of reviews for things that aren't Minecraft related, that will be becoming a much larger pattern from our channel. I've really talked about most of what I wanted to talk about when it comes to Minecraft animations, at least for now. But if there's ever anything that catches my eye in the future, I'll make sure to review it. For those of you still watching, please consider liking and subscribing. We're pretty close to 100 subs, and when we get there, I'm going to do a Q&A. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching.